when you allow fear to change your behavior the wrong way, that is when you can give yourself that title of coward. And I think that that is a title that I have feared my whole life. And that label is I'm more afraid of that label than the label of failure. I'd rather be a failure than a coward.
For people starting from scratch, what do they usually come to you for? Like if you were in their shoes, what would you be hoping to get from Alex Hormozi?
I think it's, there's what they think they want and what they actually need, which are two different things. And so I think what they think they want is some tactic that's going to immediately help them start a business. What they typically actually need is the courage to be willing to be wrong and to be willing to have shame by failing at things in front of people whose opinions they care about. And I think that's, like, if I rewind the clock for me, it was probably one of the hardest things that I had to get over. And so I think that's why maybe my message resonates with a lot of people, is because it was so hard for me to get over. And what's interesting is basically anybody who's listening, the harder it is for you to break free of whatever kind of mental prison you've made for yourself, whether that's real or just in your head, the more compelling your story will be when you break through it. Because it will resonate with even more people. For the people that it was easy, that their story doesn't have a lot of, like, I was immediately an entrepreneur. Like, I wasn't like that. I had a job when I was in high school. I had a job immediately out of college. Some people were like, I was selling lemonade out of the back of my, thing when I was 13. I didn't do any of that. School failed me. I actually was pretty good at school. I didn't have any of those issues. You know what I mean? And so I had a pretty clear career path. And so I had what many would consider, like, I had a real opportunity cost. So I had a white collar job and I had a GMAT score above Harvard's mid score. And so I had a really clear path of what my life could look like in the next 20, 30 years. And it was fairly well defined. Like, I'll go to Harvard or Stanford or one of the top business schools, and then I will either go back into management consulting or I'll go into investment banking and then eventually end up in private equity. And that would be the path, right? And then all the flowers would be set at my feet and, everyone would say, we approve of you. You're an excellent person. But when I saw the people who were 20 years ahead of me, I really didn't want their life. And then it started making me look at my life, and I was like, I don't even know if I really want my life. And so the big decisions that I've made in my life, unfortunately, have almost always come at the doorstep of apparent death. And I think maybe in some ways that makes me a coward for having needed death to make decisions. And so operationalizing that has been something that has helped me move faster to make decisions that I know I need to make but don't. And so, like, the first big kind of, like, what it felt like a death decision was, I was a consultant, 22-ish years old. I had a paid for, condo that I bought overlooking the city. And I remember thinking, like, I really hope I don't wake up tomorrow. And I don't mean that to be melodramatic. I just for a period of time, I just always just like hoped every night. I was like, I just really hope I don't wake up tomorrow. Like, I just don't want to do this. And what was difficult about that was that at that time was when my father was most proud of me, because I was doing everything that was according to plan. He could talk about, like, his son who graduated in 3 years from Vanderbilt, had the good job, like, everything we're following the plan. And it was upon realizing that my ultimate expression of living out his dream was me feeling like I didn't want to be alive. And so and it took me time to get to that point to even articulate that, because obviously you never want to kind of, like, admit failure of, like, I have really messed something up here. But I was living my life to win someone else's game. And when I realized that one of our dreams had to die, either his or mine. And when I realized that his dream must die in order for mine to live, was a statement that I kind of crystallized when I was at that point in my life. Like, I had to keep repeating that, like, his dream has to die in order for mine to live. And so to put this in perspective of, like, how afraid of my father's judgment I left the state and drove across the country halfway through before calling him to tell him that I was gone. And so I bring this up because I'm not trying to be dramatic here, but I'm saying that if you feel a lot of pressure, I get it. Like, I tried to leave the job that I was at to pursue just literally anything that wasn't that. Just, I wanted to start a business at some point. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I just knew that what I was doing was not the path I wanted to be on. And everybody around me wanted me to be on that path. And so I went to go be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing something else. And, it would always be that, don't, later, like everything's good, later. And I remember when I called my dad and I told him that. He said, understand, why don't you come home? Like, come home. Well, I didn't tell him that I was gone yet. Like, I said, hey, I want to go pursue this fitness thing. He said, cool, come over for lunch. We'll talk about it. And I was like, I'm already gone. And then obviously his tone changed a lot. And our relationship struggled for, years after that. And I also bring that up because sometimes there's this illusion that like, you get on the Oscar stage or whatever it is, and you're like, hey, I just want to thank, my mom, my dad, my friends for always supporting me. And I can't say that. And I wish I could. And you might not be able to say that either. And I also don't think that's a reason not to do it. And so we did struggle for years after that to kind of like, because I was basically living as what was once his prodigal son, goes and takes a minimum wage job as a personal trainer at a gym, cleaning floors and stuff to learn the gym business. But that was ultimately like how I broke free, literally, physically leaving the area and, mentally. But I think that I had to accept that there was a timeline where my father would never talk to me again. And I had to be okay with that to pursue what I wanted. And I think that when you asked the original question, what are the people from 0 to 1 really looking for? I read tons of business books at that time, but I couldn't use any of them because I was so afraid. And what's crazy is that like, I think about it now in retrospect, and it's like, it's crazy how large the perceived monsters can appear. And Layla has this quote that I love, but it's, fear is a mile wide and an inch deep. And so you look at it and it looks like this ocean. And then you take the first step and you realize you don't drown because it's like, oh, there's ground underneath of this, right? There's other people who are more on my path. And the friends you lose, you gain new friends, right? And so that fear was the hardest decision that I've had to overcome in my entrepreneurial career. And I think of all the split paths in my life, that was the one that if I had many timelines or many universes that existed, that was probably the one that is the most likely that I would not have parted from. So I think in like 90% of universes that Alex Hormozi exists, I'm just a consultant somewhere. And so I would encourage you, if you do feel that, you're not going to die. Like you won't die and you might just live. And I think, and I used what I consider a very non-palatable word of coward purposefully because no one wants to say they're afraid, because if you say you're afraid, then it means you're a coward. And I think that it only means you're a coward if you allow that fear to change your behavior in an aversive way, as in it not towards what you want. Mm-hmm. And so, the inverse of that, many people have heard it, courage is not acting without fear, but despite fear. And I think that when you allow fear to change your behavior the wrong way, that is when you can give yourself that title of coward. And I think that is a title that I have feared my whole life. And that label is I'm more afraid of that label mm-hmm. than the label of failure. I'd rather be a failure than a coward.
Is there a framework for knowing when to quit?
So I think there's like the math behind it. And the math I think is pretty straightforward. So like, when do you quit your business? You've saved up 3 to 6 months of personal savings, number one. Number two is that you have started something, because nowadays in the digital age, you can begin a business on the side that can generate income. And that income, in the small amount of time that you're not working, replaces or at least matches the existing income you have from your current job. And you've been able to do that or demonstrate that income for like 3 to 6 months. If you do that, that's a very like math way of approaching it. That also is basically never the reason that people aren't quitting their job, right? Like that's a really like I have backlog. I've matched my current income with my part-time work. And if I just put my full-time work, I would probably make more. Very reasonable, but never actually the reason that people don't do it.
When you're starting fresh, should you follow inspiration or focus on what suits you personally?
Man, this is a really good question. So there's a tweet that I love by Andrew Wilkinson, which is every entrepreneur ever, here's the winning number for my lottery ticket. And so it's like every entrepreneur will say, here's the winning lottery ticket, but it's like that drawing already happened.
Okay, yeah.
Right? And so like you can't cash that ticket in, it's already done. And so people say the word first principles. No one really knows what it means. I mean, some people do, but I think far more people say it than know what it means. And so basically, there are foundational truths of business that exist, and the conditions of the environment will change. And so you have to apply those truths to whatever the current condition is. And so that's what I try and tease out with the books and the stuff that I put out in content. But at the end of the day, you have an input of time, like zooming all the way out. If the goal, assuming that your goal is to make money, okay, like, and this is just a purely economic business goal, then you have time, which is the primary currency that you trade it, and you make dollars over a period of time. And so I tend to reject the idea of like never trade time for dollars or anything like that, because everyone trades time for dollars. It's just some of us are more efficient at it than others. But even exchanges that occur that just are not denominated in time still occur over time. And so you have this foundational unit of time, which you're going to give in. What we're seeking is the highest return on that time. And so within a business context, there's kind of three levels of things that have to occur in a business. You have to, attract attention, you have to convert attention, and then you have to deliver something for that attention. And in each of those things, you want as much leverage as possible. So you want as little time as possible required to get the most output. And so I have built acquisition.com on basically two primary theses, which are in the logo, which is, this is a fulcrum for leverage.
For people that can't see, it's like a triangle.
Yeah, so it's like a triangle, or the Illuminati, because that always gets brought up. Yeah, right. So we've got the fulcrum for leverage, and then inside of it, you have supply and demand. And I see those as the two foundational principles of business. And so, which is, you need supply and demand to have a business, and then leverage to get as much out of it as you possibly can. And so, when you're looking at the assets that you have, assets can also be skills, resources, what you have available to you. Now, if you have nothing, then all you have is your brain, your hands, and the time that you have that you can put towards learning something, which is why I'm a big fan of skill acquisition as one of the primary things that you can do is educating yourself. And not formally educating, but informally or alternatively educating yourself on super tactical things. Once you get over the fear, then you start asking, okay, how do I let people know about my stuff? And what do I let them know? Right? And so you have to have something to sell, which is the offer. And ideally, you want the offer to have as much leverage as possible. Like, so if you sold software or you sold media, those are things that you can cut once, sell 1,000 times. If you have a conversion mechanism, it's like you can't have it be automated like a checkout page or some sort of video sales letter or something like that where people just buy without a phone salesperson. If you add a phone salesperson, there's less leverage. Not to say that's wrong, but you want to have the highest leverage opportunity. And then from the deliverability perspective, I kind of talked about deliverability first, but from the advertising perspective, if you reach out to people one-on-one, that's lower leverage than being able to make one piece of content that a million people see, right? And so over time, you go from low leverage to high leverage, where you have the same inputs, but you just get significantly more for your output. And that fundamentally is like, if we're reasoning out from first principles, how do I get, said differently, the question that someone I think is really asking is, how do I get the most for what I put in? And you have to reason within your current context of your skills and your resources and your assets in order to derive that solution for you.
If a stranger said, "Hey, Alex, I just quit. What should I work on?" What's your answer?
Yeah, right. So I would say business ideas typically come from one of three Ps. So it comes from a pain that you're currently experiencing, a past profession, so the thing that you just quit or some of the jobs that you just quit, or a passion. Mm-hmm. So something that you're inherently interested in that you would spend your time doing anyways, some skill that you learned while you were in the workforce, which, by the way, is one of the most proven ways of making money because the economy has already showed you that people are willing to exchange money for that specific job. And so in the world of gig economies and solopreneurs, every business can be dismantled into just jobs being done, and all of those jobs can be fractionalized. So anybody, like, we look at any business, you've got sales, you've got marketing, you've got customer success, you've got customer support if you want to differentiate that, you've got product, you've got design, you've got web pages. There's so many different components to a business. You just need to learn one of them. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, boom, you have a skill that you can trade for money that you don't have anybody else to report to. And then pain is usually, I think, in some ways, sometimes one of the biggest drivers is like you had an eating allergy and you couldn't find pancakes that dealt with your specific eating allergy. And you bet that there's a decent amount of other people with that allergy that also like pancakes. And so then you make pancakes that are delicious and amazing that also cater to people with that food allergy. And then all of a sudden, like, you have a business based on pain.
And why does that matter?
What
the
part?
pain part.
What
leverage and advantage does it give you for the next 5 years?
I think that deep knowledge of the prospect is paramount or very important for creating exceptional products. And you can either do that by doing a ton of research or by being the prospect. And there's a certain amount of like visceral feel that you'll know. Like if someone wants to make a nose product for breathing, I have tried every product since I was in 8th grade. So it's been 20 plus years, 30, whatever, a lot of years, that since then, and I've tried everything. And so I know the pros and cons of every product that exists on the market. And I can tell, and I've done, it's not like, oh, I tried it for a day. It's like, I'll try things for a month at a time. And so I have so much time exposure to this problem that I have a lot of nuance in my opinion on what's wrong with the solutions. So I can formulate a way better hypothesis on how to fix it.
And that hypothesis will be, for an investor, so much more compelling because you lead with a story as opposed to logic.
I met the guy who invested in Regal Cinemas, which is probably the biggest chain in the U.S. And it was when there was a guy who had just one theater, and it became, now obviously COVID has disrupted that business, but for 20 years, whatever, they crushed. And he said it was so weird to say that, oh, cinemas are going to make a comeback because they'd kind of been on a downturn or something like that during the time that he was making the investment. And he said, the reason I decided to invest in it was because this guy knew everything about the business down to how much the cost of a kernel of popcorn was. And he just knew it so like the back of his hand that he was like, this guy can't fail. Like he just knows too much about this business to not have it work. And so in investing in, making a gazillion dollars. And so, but I think that deep understanding, and if you look at all of these, the passion things, you'll have deep understanding because you're spending all of your discretionary time pursuing this passion. The pain, you have a deep understanding of the problem and the prospects going through it because you've experienced it probably for years. Now, the professional one, I would say, is a bit of a shortcut because if you're quitting the job because you don't like it, and then you say, I'm now going to do this for myself, well, you're okay. The one proven point about that is that one is proven to work from an economic perspective. You will be able to make money doing that because you already have made money doing it.